you all for being here today. It really means a lot that you would give up some of your time this afternoon and share this event with me. I called you all here, asked you to come share the news because I'm running for mayor this year. So there's a lot of stuff that we could talk about, but nobody wants to hear me talk that long. So I'm going to be very brief and just kind of shorten it down. So the first thing that I'm going to bring to Seaside is reinvestment in our community. We've heard that over and over in the last couple of weeks. 43% of the budget goes to the police, and we've got community groups that are just not able to thrive. They are hanging on. Village Project, CPY, Orchestra in the schools, and in my mind it's not an either or, it's an and. We can do public safety in the traditional model, and we can also invest in our community groups. It's not a binary equation. And I'm looking forward to having this time after our last budget conversation to have that deeper dive. The council agreed to do a 90-day study of which groups we fund and to what amount to really kind of dig into that so we make a good choice. We're going to talk about whether we want to bring in like a social worker or a public health nurse to work with our fire department, work with our police, so we can get more engagement from groups that are hesitant to speak with the police, and really kind of have a full spectrum of service and not just the suppression. And I want to specifically talk about that very quickly. We have the Blue Ribbon Task Force for the Prevention of Youth Violence. In 2014, we had 6 murders pretty quickly. And then very shortly thereafter, we went down to 0. And then ever since, it's been about 2 a year, at the most, some years 0 as well. And I really feel like that's the good work of the Blue Ribbon Task Force. They committed to investing in community, working with our nonprofit partners, and developing strategies that really double down on the prevention so it doesn't happen, the intervention so when it happens we can nip it in the bud before it gets bad, and suppression's last in that equation. And it's only a third of that equation. The majority of the focus is stop it before it happens and interrupt it when it does. So in my view, we should be giving more money to those things and less to the suppression, but certainly feeding all of them because it's a holistic approach. Of course, we cannot have a conversation about electoral politics without talking about affordable housing. We still have a dire need in our community. 86%, 84% of the jobs in Monterey require people to commute in. So, 8.5 out of every 10 workers in Monterey commute in. So if you see the highway in the morning, if you're stuck in traffic on 68, it's because so is everybody else trying to get to their job, get to MPUSD schools, get to MPC, DLI, NPS. There is not enough infrastructure, but that's super expensive. Why don't we just spread out the services in the communities that already exist? I'm not saying anything about paving forward, I'm not saying anything about paving over farmland, but we have cities right here. There's Marina, Seaside, East Garrison, CSUMB. Why we don't have more services where people already are, instead of making everybody go to one place, is a planning problem. It's a long-term planning problem, and we can have more robust conversations and develop plans so that while we may not feel the immediate effects right now, we won't be having these same conversations in 20 years and 40 years and 100 years. We need to be thinking long-term and not our lifetimes long-term, our great-great-great-grandkids' lifetimes long-term. The last thing that I'll talk about, even though we could do this for a lot longer, is that there is no doubt about it, almost all of us are wearing our masks right now because there's a public health crisis. A lot of folks are out of work, highest unemployment rate that we've seen in Monterey County. I think I counted it up just this morning or yesterday, there's something like 50 million people out of work in the United States, unemployed or underemployed. And I'm really grateful for my colleagues on the council who have joined me here today. The 3 of us voted to support outdoor dining on Broadway as a way to create more business opportunity, develop more tax revenue for the city, and give people a little bit more hope and optimism about what lies ahead. We've all been sheltering in place, we've all been struggling to find those personal connections, and maybe some of you would disagree, but Zoom for me is not a personal connection. The phone call is not a personal connection, that's a medium. Personal connection is physically sharing coffee or space with somebody and having that relationship. And so, being able to give people the opportunity to spread out and enjoy a bite to eat with their family members and just be around other people as social creatures, that's something that's really impactful. And I was grateful that the 3 of us together decided that was something we wanted to give a shot. Now, it may not work out, but that, again, is a planning issue. That's a logistics problem. If we don't even try, what is the message we're sending? That we're not willing to find a way forward, even when the ground is moving underneath us. And if you are not willing to adapt, if you're not willing to change, then you're going to get left behind. And that's not what Seaside can afford to do, and not what I'm going to let happen in Seaside. One of the things that I'd like to bring forward is a small business liaison or a navigator who helps local businesses apply for those SBA, those Small Business Administration loans, who helps them with city paperwork, so we don't lose people just because it's too hard to fill out those forms and they're busy running their shops and they don't have the bandwidth to read hundreds of pages of documents and figure out whether it's loan 7B or 612A. All that stuff is super complicated. But if we had somebody on staff that was helping us invest in ourselves by bringing in this federal money for the Small Business Administration, we got nowhere to go but up. So anyway, it's about 4.5 months before the election. It's going to be a race. It's going to really be a fight. There are a lot of folks who like the way that things are in Seaside, but there are, in my belief, my opinion, we heard just the other night, there are many folks who aren't. And it's going to be incumbent upon all of us who say we want some change to turn out our voters, to turn out our neighbors to become voters, to really help push our community into the 21st century and embrace that the world's changing all around us and that we need to change with it or we're going to get left behind. So to that end, find somebody that's not registered to vote and walk them through the process. Check in with your family members, your colleagues at work, make sure they're voting. Just support the idea that our democracy is better when we're all engaged, because it really is. And thank you again for all being here. I really quickly wanted to invite River to say a word. Thank you so much for being here. River is one of our local educators and has been really a leading voice with the Community for Cops group who wants to see more investment in our communities.
Yeah, hi folks, thank you. I'll take my mask off as well. And just say thank you for being here. Thank you. Can we give it up real quick for Will? We need to work on the chanting, but that's okay, we'll get there. So yeah, I'm a teacher at Seaside High School. I've been there for 4 years. I care very, very, very much about our youth, very, very much about the people who exist in Seaside already. And the moves that we keep trying to make for Seaside that I see happening are just a step towards, honestly, bringing in more tourism, bringing in more gentrification. I don't know what else to call it. But what we need for Seaside is services for the people who are already here. And for longevity, for the rising cost of living, it's on a trajectory and it needs to go down. The wages, the people who work here in Seaside, or the people who live here in Seaside and work across the entire county, especially in that direction of the peninsula, we need services. And I see our youth getting ready to graduate and having their options reduced because Seaside lacks a lot of the services that other cities, especially on the peninsula, get. We really need to work together, and I think that COVID and quarantine has taught us a lot about the ways that we're going to be able to support one another. We have reached out with mutual aid. We are all, showing up on social media in a different way. It's not always healthy, but I think it can be a powerful way for us to connect with people that we may never otherwise meet, and for us to participate in city government, right? So these Zoom meetings, I didn't prepare anything obviously, so this is a little bit circular, but these Zoom meetings actually could enable civic engagement in a way that we have never seen. And they could also be used to silence other people. So we have to make sure that equity and accessibility is #1 for our Spanish-speaking community, who is so often shut out of the city government process here. We need everything in Spanish, and Wizard has been advocating for that. We need support for our disabled community, right? We need physical accommodations, and we need services for deaf, blind, and folks with neurodivergence. And Wizard has been advocating for accessibility, and I want to see more people running, I want to see more people engaging, I want to see more people like John Wizard, but here he is, right? He's already doing it, he's doing the work and showing up, and I think the first time I met him was at a Palenque Arts event. He came out to see our multicultural arts center that supports some of our communities' poorest, who have the least access to things like arts, which are huge in the development of human beings. And he came out to see the play at Seaside High School that my students were putting on. And then he shows up for Community Before Cops. I mean, he showed up and was saying defund before we even coined the term Community Before Cops, and he's been part of it ever since. And as he said, it's not about it's not about looking for a model that we can implement this moment and suddenly everything will change. But that 90-day plan, like, I have such faith that every day John Wizard is going to be working on that plan. It's not talk, it's a walk. And that's all I'll say. Just thank you so much, John, and thank you all for being here, and Wizard!
Thank you so much, River. And then, River mentioned something that I really want to highlight very briefly before we wrap up. It's just a few minutes before 4, that many of the employees, many of the people who work in Seaside, many of the people who live in Seaside but work elsewhere, employees outside of Seaside that are residents of this community, many of them work in the hospitality industry, which is very common throughout the peninsula. We have kind of these siloed economic systems. We have ag in the Salinas and Pajaro valleys, and we have tourism and hospitality here on the peninsula. And the labor group are our union brothers and sisters who expect fair wages for fair pay. 90% of them are out of work because of the pandemic and the shelter-in-place orders. And if we think that our city can absorb 90% of Unite HERE not bringing income into their families and would just pick up like no big deal, we're in for a very rude awakening. And so we need to continue partnering with the food bank. We need to continue partnering with our community groups that provide after-school care and hot meals, and like Village Project's Manana program, which is culturally congruent history for Black and brown kids. We need to really lean into lifting up our community, because if we don't step up right now in this time while we work through the public health crisis, who's going to be there for them? What nonprofit is going to wrap up all of the people in our community? That's why we have so many nonprofits. Some of them do art, some of them do music, some of them do fair housing assistance when you get an eviction notice for no reason. We have nonprofit groups that do a lot of little things, and some of them are big nonprofits and small, but no one entity does everything. But the city to which the tax dollars go is supposed to ensure nobody gets left behind. And with the current public health crisis, I'm not sure that we as a city are ready to meet that challenge, and that's frightening to me, because so many people are going to get left out if we don't step up. And I'm helping our city manager and city clerk, who's our assistant city manager. I'm working with my colleagues on the council to advocate for those things and help that. I hope that we can rise to that challenge, but I guarantee you, if you give me the privilege of setting the agenda, I will work with the other council members to make sure that's front and center. So we got 5 minutes left, 2 minutes left. I just wanted something to add. Yes.
What is your outlook
Yeah, so one of the things that I brought up a while back was something called a commercial linkage fee, and it's a very wonky thing, but to just distill it very briefly, retail jobs are not known for their high pay. So if you make $14 an hour or $15 an hour working at Target or CVS or whatever it might be hard for you to afford the median rent in the city or even the region in which you work, which is then going to exacerbate traffic, and that's a climate issue, which is a health issue. So if we charged a commercial linkage fee, you have to do a study to make sure that you don't overcharge and that the area could support it. But essentially what you do is you tell this commercial operator, Walmart, whoever it might be, for every square foot that you're going to occupy, you pay a flat rate. And we use that money to either support housing choice vouchers or lower, create affordable housing options. That they invest money into the community more than just taxes, because everybody does that. But if you only make $15 an hour, there's no way that you're affording $2,000 a month for your 2-bedroom home with your family. So I brought that idea up. I got laughed out of the room by the big whales. That's we were going to look into it. We were going to put money in the budget to do that study. But with the health crisis, there's not a lot of money to go around, and the Campus Town project is likely not going to be moving very quickly because it's going to be hard to obtain $100 million construction loans. So I think there's still a little bit of time to work that in, and we can attach that to when we give building permits to people, and we give them certificates of occupancy. It doesn't have to be rented from. So that's in the works, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Okay, so would you encapsulate that in a few words and send it to me so I can quote you?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you for that opportunity, Wanda. All right, so it is really 4 o'clock. I just want to say one last thing. Jessica and I, everybody, can we just give a round of applause to Jessica? She's so lovely, and she's the best, and I love her pieces. And then my 2 stepkids, Ashley and Tristan, they came out today even though they're with their dad today, so I just feel a lot of love for my family, and I'm just grateful that they're here with us. And then we're going to take them back to their dad's place, but then I invite every last one of you to come with me to Other Brother, and I'll get your first drink. You got to support our local businesses, and you got to put your money where your mouth is. So thank you all for coming out today. See you for a pint, and be well. Thank you.